Welcome everybody, and this is the Nebula Vibe channel. Welcome back. Today is going to be a different type of video than you have seen from me in the past, and it's going to be a series of a few videos that I'm going to do that I feel that I've been called to do. And my intention with these is to share my experience and also share some tools and resources for healing. And I'm probably not going to get super detailed into a lot of the personal experiences, but I will share some examples to hopefully create some common ground, maybe help you gain some insight that you haven't had until this point. And my hope is that you'll find this helpful in your own healing journey. And that is why I know I'm being called to share this, even though it is incredibly difficult for me to share. So without beating around the bush, as they say, too much more, this whole series is going to be about PTSD and healing from PTSD. And I have experienced both early childhood trauma and trauma throughout adulthood. Now, trauma is a massive word. It's kind of nebulous as well. And PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, can be from any kind of trauma. You know, you've obviously got one of the biggest ones that you normally hear the term associated most with, which is military-based trauma and war and, IUDs and absolute insane amounts of violence. There is also obviously domestic violence. There's different ways that trauma can manifest in our lives, right? And even a death of a loss or a death of a loved one can be incredibly traumatic, depending on the way that loss happens. Divorce, and I say this not to minimize or elevate any one of those. Any kind of trauma, any kind of traumatic experience is relevant because it's your experience. And I think a lot of times we tend to minimize our own suffering because we can see such intense suffering and such massive suffering on a global scale, both from our history as a collective and in the present moment. There's so much suffering and so much trauma happening all around the world. But there is also incredible people that have healed from so much and found ways to journey through the muck of all of the feelings and beliefs and associations and flashbacks and everything else that comes with it, to find a place of balance and peace and confidence and be able to share their story from a place of love and in an effort to lift others out of that depths of despair from the natural progression of having experienced any kind of trauma. And so one of the things I wanted to do is actually give the symptoms of PTSD, because it's something that in 2017, I didn't even really think that I had it, even though I absolutely did. I was starting to build my vision for a nonprofit that I'm still working on. But every time I tried to take steps forward, I kept getting blocked. And I finally looked up the symptoms for PTSD. And as I was reading through it, I was like, holy shit, this is me. Like, this is how I feel. And I didn't even realize it. And I didn't want to just self-diagnose, which I don't recommend. But I did enroll a second time for therapy at that point. And I will get more detailed into my specific journey and path and the different modalities that I've used to come to a place of healing, even though I do believe healing is a journey and a path and a daily practice. I also do believe that you can heal. and that it doesn't always have to be a struggle or painful to do so, even though the healing process, it can be and is incredibly painful to allow yourself to feel through all that is associated with those traumas. So, requires a medical diagnosis, first off, but symptoms may include nightmares or unwanted memories of the trauma, avoidance of situations that bring back memories of the trauma, heightened reactions or hypervigilance, which was a big one for me. Actually, all of these were and sometimes still are. So heightened reactions, anxiety, and depressed mood. Obviously, that can go into, chronic depression and daily debilitating anxiety. So some other behavioral things that you're going to see is like agitation, irritability, hostility, hypervigilance, like I mentioned, self-destructive behavior, isolation. And so that's behavioral. Psychological, you may have flashbacks, fear, severe anxiety or mistrust, another huge one. Mood, loss of interest or pleasure in doing activities, even though that you normally gain pleasure and joy from. Deep guilt and loneliness. Sleep-wise, insomnia or nightmares, and or night terrors. And then also common is emotional detachment or unwanted thoughts. And those are those like automatic negative thoughts where it's like something changes, something happens, and you automatically go to the worst case scenario. And it just always pops up, and that is your default programming. That is also a big, big part of PTSD. So I know this is a super heavy topic, but I wanted to share what those symptoms were, because I think there are so many people on this planet that not only have PTSD from their own experiences, but are also carrying the burden of generational trauma. There is an incredible book called It Didn't Start With You, by Mark Wallen, I believe is his name, and I'll link it, a link for it below in the description box. But he talks about the research that shows, and these studies that show, we genetically within our physiological meat suits carry up to 3 generations of trauma. When we are a single-celled organism, egg in our mother's belly, when they are babies in their mother's belly, we are imprinted with the thoughts, feelings, experiences, beliefs that our grandmas had. And if you think about how that stacks over generations, it makes sense as to why there is, honestly, so many suicides, so many mental illness problems, so many mental health problems, so many addiction problems, self-harm, all of it. It is just violence in general. We are programmed by our ancestors' experiences. And it goes both ways, right? It's negative and positive. And so we're also programmed with those positive experiences and talents and skills and joys and beliefs and that incredible culture and ancestry that we also have in these little or big meat suits, whatever size you are. And somewhat unfortunately, we are overweighted in a negative bias to hold on to and retain negative memories more so than positive memories, because that is part of our survival mechanism. Our bodies, being animal mammal bodies, our little tiny amygdala brain, that fear center brain, is a huge part of how we are able to survive. And when you have PTSD, that amygdala brain could pretty much be energetically like the size of your whole brain, and it takes over your whole body. Because when you have flashbacks, when you have nightmares, and you have undealt with trauma, your body re-experiences that trauma and gets triggered by all your senses, and it's all unconscious. And I think a lot of people are walking around with unconscious PTSD and completely unaware of it. And I say that so confidently because when I was an adult, and I'll get more into this, but when I was 25 or so, 25, I experienced death threats from a former employee I had to fire. And after that, that was my first time I ever signed up for therapy, CBT therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. And that was literally because I could not function on a day-to-day basis. I was living in so much fear because I was literally being threatened and getting called at work and told that I was going to be fucking killed. And, where I lived, I had to move, there's all these things that happened and transpired, having to get a restraining order, all these things. And that 8 weeks of therapy helped me get back to a survival mode, but a pretty somewhat functional mode. Definitely not at a thriving state, but surviving and able to work again. What I didn't realize was that I had repressed so much more trauma. And I'm going to get more into this later, but the way that, and I've always had this knowing in myself that the way that our brains work is that when something happens to us that's just shitty, that's just horrible, traumatic, whatever, the first instinct is I wish that didn't happen. I wish it didn't happen to me. And then our brains that have this incredible ability to get rid of information we don't need. It's almost like cache memory in a computer, right? It's like that short-term memory goes, well, you don't need to keep that, so we're going to just get rid of that. And that's why, random things that we have stored elsewhere, like in our phones or anywhere else, old phone numbers, like we don't retain it because we don't need it on a daily basis. And so it clears that out. When you want things to be gone and you want to forget things, your brain is highly efficient at that, and it goes, bloop, you're going to forget that. And sometimes I think with trauma, it becomes overactive. And then we start to lose the good memories and we start to lose concepts of time. And I had massive chunks in my life that I could not recall any memories from. And through many, many years of therapy and different healing modalities, I have come to a place of, I feel finally thriving now in my life and being clear and not having this energetic weight of fear and loss and pain at all times that I'm carrying. And so I want to share what I've gone through, how I've gotten to that point, the path that I've been on. And I know it'll be triggering. I know it'll be really hard to hear some of it, but I share it in hopes that it can help at least one person on their path find a little more ease, find some help, find some support, and understand you're not alone. You're not alone. And so you will see more from me on this. This is the first video of at least, it's probably going to be like, what did I put down? 8 or so of these, and I want them to be a little shorter since it's a really intense topic. But thank you for listening. Thank you for joining. And I will see you on my next video, and we will go more into CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and my experiences with that. And I'll provide some resources as well. So until now, be kind to yourself, be gentle with yourself. I love you, and I will see you in my next video. Bye. Well, that was not what I wanted to do. Stop. Vibes.